at least you did some work. You're willingly stepping up and fulfilling your duties as a homeowner and as a working American. Um, Someone who's possibly not fulfilling all their duties as a working American, and we'll get into my feelings on that momentarily, is Rafael Devers. He is still hacking away as the designated hitter, but a recent injury, devastating injury to Tristan Casas, which is likely going to cost him yet another substantial amount of time on a season, has created a vacancy at first base, to be very kind. That's led obviously to calls for Rafael Devers to move to first base, which was something that was always kind of assumed is probably too strong a word, but urged after the Alex Bregman signing. And it sounds like not only have there not been any conversations to that effect, it sounds like they're not even entertaining conversations to that effect, either on the player side or the manager side or the team side. There's a lot of problems that I have with this entire situation, but I will let you go first and see if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I don't. The thing is, it's still a situation where I don't know enough. Like, is it that Rafael Devers is truly just like rejecting it outright, or is it that the Red Sox don't want to? If it's the Red Sox just as much, like they don't want to do it because you also like it creates a potential weird outcome where he plays first base all season, and then next year you basically have a redo of what happened this spring, where they're like, "Hey, we know you were passable there, but you're the DH again because we went out and signed or traded for whoever," and then he's pissed all over again. So I could see a situation where the Red Sox are like, we've made this bet. He's a DH. We're not messing with it. Maybe they just don't think he'd be able to. He would the learning curve would be too steep, and he would be a disaster over at first base. I think people too often think that it's like you just put someone over there and they can figure it out. And the thing that annoys me is like those same people that say just give Roman Anthony a first baseman, give Trevor Story, give Rafael Devers a first baseman, are the same people that killed the Red Sox for just giving Bobby Dalbec a first baseman and watching him really struggle and saying, well, this is play dumb games, win dumb prizes. You can't just put anybody over there. So you can't just do that. So I think there's a case to be made that at least in the short term, what they're doing right now is the best path with Romy Gonzalez and whoever they have platooning with him. Um, but that said, I do think that it feels inevitable that he will eventually go over there because I just don't know what other solution they have. Like, I think cooler heads eventually will prevail one way or the other because to me, there are only two ways through this unless they go sign a veteran or trade for a veteran, and that is Devers or Trevor Story. Like, and I don't even like the idea of putting Trevor Story over there. I think that's a weird fit too. But I just don't really know what other path they have other than going out and making an addition, which I don't know if they want to do that just yet, unless it's for someone like Dom Smith. So I just think they're in a weird spot, and I don't know if there's any clean solution. And I certainly don't think the cleanest solution is having Meyer or Anthony do it. I think that's the worst idea, and I think people that are suggesting that are stupid,
All
really
right.
stupid.
Tell us how you really feel. So, um, I will. I was going to get to this later. I would love to see Christian Campbell at first base. I know that is hard timing for him, seeing as he just came up. But he's got the size. He's got his money. He doesn't have to worry about the fact that right-handed hitting first basemen are incredibly devalued in MLB nowadays. So I would like to see that, especially because it opens up second base for the inevitable arrival of Marcelo Mayer. So that is my hope for, if not by the end of this season, coming out of next season, because I I'm not convinced that Casas is. I don't mean like when I say I'm not convinced he's coming back. I don't mean like he'll never play baseball again. I don't know I don't know that the ship on Casas has not sailed. Um, as a actual fulcrum of the Red Sox. I think he's kind of getting in. I think he's gotten now with this injury into the realm of I just don't know. It probably ain't gonna ever happen. For the last 3 years, we've been basing a lot on half a season in 2023 and saying it once he figures out, once he stays healthy, all these sorts of things. And you can only fool me so many times before I start to say, you know what, I don't know if I can count on this anymore. And with if I was putting together my dream scenario for the Red Sox, he gone, goodbye. If I was putting together my dream scenario for the Red Sox, it would be 2026 Campbell first, Mayer second, assuming Story is still here. Story at short, and Bregman at third if I'm doing my infield. So that is when you say, I don't see another answer, that's what I would prefer to be the answer, allowing for the fact that I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell that Alex Cora is going to have the managerial courage to make that call.
Yeah, sorry, my wife is napping, so when my cat opens the door, like it just did, I have to run to shut the door so I don't piss off my wife.
Cat.
Um, but yeah, I think on Cassis, I think if nothing else, like I find it hard to envision him like playing first base next year, at least even that much, just because he's already slow. Um, I do think he's a better first baseman than people give him credit for, but I just think like he's probably a DH now, or at least next year when he comes back. Like it makes the most sense to have him DH and not spend that much time on his knee. I mean, patella tendon's a serious injury, and I know Cole Strange just came back from it in football, which is probably even harder. But different sports, different athletes, right? Um, and so, I mean, if he's not going to DH for the Red Sox next year unless they trade Rafael Devers, right? Maybe you just swap them. Maybe Cassis is the DH and Devers is the first baseman. It's a possibility. But I'm just with you. Like I I've I am like team Tristan Cassis. I've always I really wasn't that worried about the slump he got off to at the start of this year. That half season you mentioned, it really was a full season except for 1 month, and then he got hurt. So like I think there's I don't know. I know I could go either way on it. I understand why some people don't believe in him. I think that's really them just sort of leaning more into like his personality quirks. I think the people that don't like Tristan Cassis don't want to like Tristan Cassis. Um, which like I don't know. I like weird people. I don't have any issue with him. And not to say he's weird. I just think he's his own person. But I just think there's this weird undercurrent of people rooting for Tristan Cassis to fail or to move on, where like I just don't get that. Not saying that's you. That is something that bothers me. But as far as like the what they should do, I do agree. Like I could see the Christian Campbell thing. I just think the Red Sox are really reluctant to throw extra variables on the plates of Campbell, Meyer, and Anthony. Of the three, it does seem like Campbell could maybe handle the best because despite Tony Maz saying he wasn't ready for the big leagues, I think he was like too ready for the big leagues. Like I don't know if I've seen a young player come up and seem more ready for the big leagues than what Christian Campbell's looked like over the first month and a half or so. So I do think he could handle it. But I just, I think they're committed to not screwing with these guys. Maybe it's, PTSD from Blake Swihart and the stuff like that went wrong. But beyond that, I just think everybody is in such a rush to bring up Anthony Meyer, and I understand. I just don't know how the roster math works. Like, I think this is a thing that doesn't get talked about enough. Where I don't like everyone says call up Anthony. I know I'm moving him to a different position on the team now, but they say call up Anthony and make Cedar Rafaela the super utility guy. And you have Anthony Duran, William Abreu. Okay, you do that. So who do you remove from the roster in that situation? It's not Romy Gonzalez because he's good first of all, and he's like sort of your top depth first baseman. He's your starting first baseman right now. It's not Rob Refsnyder. He's one of the best in baseball at that kind of specific role. You need the right-handed hitter outfielder that can crush lefties, and it's not going to be David Hamilton, because despite what we think about David Hamilton, I mean, there have been some credible reports that the Red Sox turned down some big trade offers for him this offseason, and I do think, you know, he can play second and short. I think he's a better hitter than Rafaela. He's fast. Like I think he's here to stay. So I just don't know who you remove from the roster. I think maybe the answer is you trade one of Rafaela or Hamilton, but regardless, I don't like either of those things. It's a weird out. It's a weird path. So I just think people calling malpractice for the Red Sox not promoting Anthony Meyer. I just think I don't know how they do it because I don't know how they accommodate Anthony, and then for Meyer, you have Trevor Story, and as much as people want to bag on Trevor Story, he's not a player that you're putting on the bench right now. And so I just don't know. I don't know what they do because because they have an obvious way to bring up one of them right now because Tristan Cassis going down, you can make that work, but both of them, I don't know how they get there without making a really tough decision with the roster.
The roster math is why Devers to first base makes so much sense because so Roman Anthony to first base, to me, if you propose that, you're not a serious person.
Yeah,
He's an outfielder. He's an outfielder.
he
He's
might be a
played.
starting center fielder.
Yeah,
Probably not, but he might be.
well, yeah, and having a guy who is an outfielder change at that stage in his career, it to me is far less realistic than having either a second baseman so far in Campbell or a third baseman in Devers, who have played infield to this point in the major leagues successfully. I mean, I know we don't think Devers has any great shakes defensively, but he's successfully played third base for full seasons. So the Roman Anthony to first base, I don't take seriously whatsoever. But Devers playing first base addresses so many of those issues that you're talking about because Devers being able to play first base then creates the possibility that you can get a Yoshida into the lineup as a DH, and that makes you better hitting there. It creates the opportunity for Anthony to play center potentially, Rafaela to split time between center field and shortstop or second base. It creates an opportunity for Mayer to fill in somewhere in the infield. It creates obviously at bats at DH for Campbell and Anthony. It addresses so many of those problems, and one thing with the Devers timeline that's always kind of tweaked me is there's the narrative is that Devers was upset about the Red Sox signing Bregman, so he showed up to camp out of shape, and it's been kind of a struggle for him to rebound since then. The timeline doesn't work there because Bregman, if I recall, was signed mid-February, and the players
Like 2 days before spring training.
right. So you can't get out of shape. You can't fall out of shape in 2 days, even
Right.
if you're Rafael Devers. That is a winter-long commitment to falling out of shape. So regardless of what they had done in free agency at the third base position, Rafael Devers was going to show up out of shape. And if anything, he was fortunate that they signed Alex Bregman so that we didn't have to watch him fall over himself for the first 2 months of the season. So that's kind of my thing when I look at Devers is like, no, this was not like a pouting of them signing someone to his position. This was someone who was just out of shape. And then when they made this move, it almost gave like a cover for why he was out of shape. He was always going to be out of shape. And that is really my number one concern with the first base thing is it's like, will he physically be able to do it? Because I'm not sure he can physically play the field. So there is that with kind of the team's reluctance to do so. There is that undercurrent of maybe Cora is worried about him embarrassing himself and he's trying to protect him from that. But for me, that's all the more reason to get him working out over there. It's almost like hey, not only do we want to get you back on the field, not only do we want to, potentially help you become a leader on the team, but we're also not going to tell you. We're also hoping you'll just kind of like work out.
Yeah. But the thing is, even if they do it, even if it is Devers at first base, it's not going to happen, right? Like, it's going to take a little bit before they actually put him there. I mean, even if they start having him take ground balls like tomorrow or today, like realistically, how long till he starts there? Like a few weeks, a month? Like, I don't know if they would feel comfortable just throwing him out there. So I think the problem's going to persist for a while. Um, and one more thought on the roster math. I think what's another interesting angle of this is that, this is kind of why I didn't like the Ceddanne Rafaela extension when it happened because, and I do think like he's been better this year than his numbers suggest. But regardless, like you can make a case at multiple points for sending him back down in the minors. With especially early in the year with how bad his chase rate was, like he was a demotable bat. But you can't demote a guy like that who you gave like a 70 million extension to last year. I mean, I know like we say like just do it, like whatever, you got to field the best lineup or the best team, but like you don't do the teams don't do that. You don't give the guy that extension, a young player with promise that extension and then send him back down. So I think they're just kind of stuck. Um, and so like I don't know what the answer is. I think Devers going over is the best solution. I don't know if it's going to happen. I personally like Story going over there, call up Meyer. You have Rafaela, spell him against lefties because I do think, Marcelo Meyer's still not very good against lefties. He's been better this year, but regardless, um, it's an obvious spot for Rafaela to get some time at shortstop if they want to put him there. Um, and then I think probably you have to look at trading David Hamilton. I think that's the only way it works to getting both of those guys up this year is if one of Rafaela, Hamilton, or Raul Bresnider are eventually off the roster or hurt. Right, an injury could solve the problem. But save that, I think you got to trade one of those guys. And to me, it's probably Hamilton. Though I would maybe strongly consider trading Rafaela just because, like I don't know, if he's ever going to be better than he is right now as a hitter. So I would, I think his value is still high. So I don't know. I know it's kind of like a
Campbell,
meandering way
yeah.
of looking at it. I just think they are in such an awkward spot, and there is an element of manipulating the service time. I don't think they want Roman Anthony to come up and win Rookie of the Year
Yeah.
because then he gets an accrued season of service time. And for a guy who could make a lot of money, that's tough. Fans don't like to hear that, but that's the way baseball operates. So there's a lot of factors in play here. And I just think that it'll be interesting to see how they solve it because I think they have to solve it sooner rather than later, especially if they keep floundering as they are now.
My last thing on Devers that I'll say is Kevin Millar got around to making a good point. Or I
Took a
think he
while.
was trying to make a good point. He was trying to make a point that I think had its basis in a good point on the broadcast on Tuesday night, which is where he said, "This is a job," and I do think that as a fan, as someone who, if you pay a lot of money to watch the Red Sox on TV, to go to the game, Rafael Devers not playing first base is offensive on some level. It's whether it's him refusing to play there or the Red Sox not making him do that, or at least approaching him and working with him to do that. When you consider the money is a cliche, but when you consider what it would do to improve the product that your audience, your fans, is paying to consume, and the team and the player are not doing it, I can see how that would be offensive to an observer.
Yeah.
And it's something that leads to disgust. It's something that leads to declining ratings. It's something that leads to declining interest. Um, like my 13-year-old daughter was even like she hasn't disliked a professional athlete in her life, but even she the other day was like, I like why it why is Rafael Devers being so selfish? And it's like, wow, like once you start losing the 12, 13 year olds, like come on, man.
Yeah. And that is true. And especially when you get into like how much money they're making, right?
Right,
It's
you
like,
like almost are loath to bring it up because it's like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, that's the
well, it is
cliche, but
fair.
like it is. It's
We're
like
all on one planet. Like we're allowed to have feelings about when all of us are trying to make ends meet, and then a guy
right.
making $400 million like can't be bothered to try an easier position, right? Like
Especially because
you
like David Ortiz, even he would put on a first baseman's mitt when they would play interleague. You
yeah.
know what I mean? I
Yeah.
that and that guy's the greatest designated hitter who ever lived.
Well, and so it kind of makes me think of, the episode we had over a month ago about, you know, let's see what this Devers storyline looks like next offseason because, I was saying then like I could totally see a trade happening. Like I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do it because he is like there's a world in which he's like the second best hitter in Red Sox history, right? Depending on if he maxes out. But like I just don't, and a lot can change between now and then, but it just, there's a lot of bad juju around it right now. And it just, I don't know. It just seems like we're heading toward that kind of outcome. But I do wonder, like, things have also changed since that episode, right? Where, now you can't feel good about Tristan Cassis becoming, supplementing that kind of power. Like you're thinking, like, well, we could consider, you can envision a world where Rafael Devers is gone if Roman Anthony comes up and is like best young player in baseball, and Tristan Cassis is finally turning into the 35, 40 homer guy. But now you're taking Cassis off the board a little bit. Or you're like, well, we might get Vlad Guerrero Jr. Next offseason, right? So we can talk about getting rid of Devers because you got maybe Vlad Jr. and all these prospects coming up. Now Vlad Jr. is off the board too. So, I don't know. You could be hurting the team maybe too much now if you entertain training Devers or trading Devers. But I just think, the fan sentiment is what it is. I don't know how happy he is here anymore. I don't know how much Cora likes having him around anymore. Um, Unless it just isn't nearly as bad as we think it is, which I always allow for that possibility. But the tea leaves just aren't good. And so I keep wondering about what this looks like next winter if they start looking at trading him.